Good morning again, Life Point Crossing. Hey, did you guys have a good week? Yeah, Jim, did you have a good week?
Yes, I did.
Come on, you guys. Listen, as a Lions fan, I'll tell you this week was exactly like every other week I've had in my life. But I'm happy for all of you. I was pulling for you and hope you had a good week. I thought it was going to be a little more enthusiastic than that, but I get you we're here for things that are more serious. All right, respect. I appreciate that. You guys, I'm so glad you're here. If you have been here or if you're very good with context clues, you know that we are in a series called Relationshift. It's all about relationships. It's a little bit been focused on marriage type of relationships, particularly this week and last week more than the rest of them, but certainly things that can apply to basically any interaction you have with another human being. And so this week particularly, I am under the impression that in 2023, the message may need to come with something of a little disclaimer up front, so here it is. This week, today, we're going to be talking about some gender difference sort of situations, and there's a lot of things I don't understand. There's a lot of things I don't understand. But I do understand that it's possible in 2023 that somebody may hear that and start to have their eyebrows or maybe their defenses come up a little bit. Maybe you feel like you could be about to be attacked in some way or somebody who you care about. And listen, if that's you, just let me say to you just very quickly, first of all, I'm glad you're here. And I hope is very, very clear that I am not here at court controversy or do anything divisive or inflammatory. If you've been around Life Point Crossing for any period of time, I hope that that's very, very evident. Let me also say that let's recognize that anything with gender differences are not 100%. We are all individuals, and we're going to be talking about things sort of in generalities. So those don't necessarily all apply to everybody in every situation. In fact, my understanding is that they generally come out to about 80-20. They'll hold true about 80% of the time for 80% of people, and not for about 20% of the time or 20% of the people. So here's what that means is, first of all, it means that this is going to be appropriate and helpful for probably a large majority of people. I know the things I'm going to talk about here have been things that have been very, very helpful for me and my marriage and thousands and thousands of others. It also does mean that about 1 out of every 5 things is you're going to say, you know what, really, that one, not me at all. That doesn't really apply. That doesn't describe me. And so here is, listen, the pastor's dream, for any pastor's dream for a message like this. Here's what would be absolutely perfect. This would be my biggest win, is if every one of us on the way home or over lunch or dinner or wherever you talk, you just talk about it. You say, you know what? Yeah, he said that, and that really, no, that's absolutely me. That's really true. This other thing, no, really not at all. And you just talk about it together. That's really the best thing that could possibly happen from a message like this. So, all that said, I hope we're ready to go. I'm not going to ask you because I'm just going to keep talking no matter what the response is. So we're going today we're going to zero in on one specific verse that is one of the most amazing, sort of under the radar, hidden in plain sight verses anywhere in Scripture, in my opinion and understanding. And it's one that, as a Bible reader, I've most of my life been a Bible reader. I came across it I don't know how many times and read it and sort of understood on some level, sort of big picture, but never really stuck out as something that was unusually insightful or helpful. Until, I think it was probably about 15 years ago, there was a sort of small flurry or wave of books that were written and then messages that were produced by that were really sort of uncovered some things that people like me had never seen that were there for 2,000 years, right there hidden in plain sight. And so if you've been in church for the last 15 years, maybe you've come across some of this, or perhaps some of this will be new to some of you, whichever the case is. But today, one amazing verse, Ephesians 5:33. Here's what it says. Let's see. The green light was on. There we are. It says, so again I say, each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. And the hidden in plain sight genius of this simple verse is really in the fact that it is instructing husbands and wives, men and women, to relate to one another in a somewhat different way. They are not, in fact, exactly identical. And so this starts by addressing the husband and the man that must love his wife. And so we'll start that just because it comes first. And that, listen, that is not impressive to anybody. Everybody knows that husbands are supposed to love their wives. There's no tremendous insight there. And in fact, the next thing that I'm going to say is equally unremarkable, is that modern psychology has determined that most females, it's never for everybody, so talk about it, but most women, your number one relational need is to be and to feel loved and cherished. Again, not that shocking, not that impressive. However, I will say that some of the implications of this really can be incredibly powerful if you're in your relationship when we come to understand them and how they work and press play on this. Because all husbands know they are supposed to love their wives. And most husbands do love their wives deeply, profoundly. That's why they married them. Is because they love them. However, I know for sure early on in our marriage, this was an issue a lot more than I thought it should be or wanted it to be, that there were too many times when Laura maybe didn't feel so loved and cherished or just wasn't really exactly sure how loved and cherished she was. And that was also frustrating for me. I mean, it's terrifying for her because of course, that's her number one relational need. And so she can deal with 1,000 different things. But if this isn't taken care of, that's disastrous. And also frustrating for me because, of course, I loved my wife. And, of course, I wanted to be a good husband, right? And so whenever this would come up, what I would do is I would reach deep into my relational toolbox and I would pull out what I was certain was the most helpful tool that I had at my disposal. And, of course, that was mathematics. And I would explain. I would say, baby, listen. There are about 3.5 billion other women in the world that I did not marry. Only you. You're the only one. You can rest secure. Don't ever question it. If you ever have any sort of doubts, you just look down on your hand and there's that ring. You pull out your driver's license. We share the same last name. Go look at the wedding photo album. You're the girl in the white dress. Don't ever have any doubts about how I feel about you. And it was really frustrating to me that no matter how many times I talked about all of the other women that I did not marry, she was not particularly impressed with that. The math, I don't understand why everybody doesn't just be healed. It's the universal language, it's absolute truth, but somehow it just didn't carry the impact that I sort of thought it would or obviously should. Like, do you want a spreadsheet? Will an algorithm help? What can we do? How deep do we need to go? But it just didn't seem to go where I thought it would. And so that's, of course, frustrating for her. And it's also frustrating for me because, of course, you want to be the good husband who gives the wife who you love. I mean, my goodness, if you've met my wife, she is not difficult to love. You want to give her everything that she needs. And so this is very difficult and very confusing. And maybe some of you have been through this, or if you remember what it's like, or if you're in the middle of it right now, it can be very difficult and very confusing. Because here's what generally most men do not intuitively understand about women, and I certainly didn't, is that they experience, for a strong majority, if you talk about like points in your relationship, like you did something good, like you scored points, right? They understand typically what we'll call love and cherish points very differently than most men would think or expect. And it's very confusing, isn't it, fellas? When you wake up in the morning and your wife feels unsure or insecure about how you feel about her, and literally last night, you were the best husband who'd ever lived. Like, all we did was sleep for 8 hours. Why would anything have changed? This doesn't make any sense. And maybe yesterday you really were the best husband who'd ever lived. Maybe it was her birthday, and man, you went all out. You threw a party. It was the biggest, best party that ever was. It was perfect. You spent a month planning for it. It went off amazing. You managed to keep it a secret, but you got her a new car, just like those old Audi Christmas commercials that almost made you cry sometimes. I'm sure that's normal. I'm not the only one. And so you feel like you absolutely hit a home run out of the park. And maybe you did. So here's how you think, men, right? Is that you have just stockpiled an enormous number of points, and you're good through Christmas. You can sit back and relax, and there is no possible way that your wife is going to be able to doubt how you feel about her. Here's where you differ. Is this really I know in baseball it's runs, not points. I understand that. But this is really a lot more like baseball, and it turns out that your wife understands baseball better than you do. Because maybe you really did hit a home run. It was amazing. You crushed it, 450 feet, watched it sail, bat flip, amazing. Here's what your wife understands, that's worth one. And if you're hit by a pitch, get bunted to second, take third on a balk, come home on a passed ball, also one. It's the same. That's still just worth one. And so this is how points work for her, is you think you scored hundreds of points so you can stockpile those, but to her, two important differences. Number one, each and everything, big or small, whether it's a mammoth home run or whether you literally fell over on home plate like a wobbly toddler, is worth one. And all points expire at midnight. I see some nodding. Listen, some of you maybe are not nodding. Some of you guys are like, this is impossible. How can this work? How will I ever win with this mysterious creature woman? I do okay. I go to work. I make a good salary, but I can't buy her a car every day. This is impossible. No, this is possible. Guys, this is how you win, is try this. Give her a hug. Ask her about her day. Wipe off the counter, throw in a load of laundry. Just be an active listener for a few minutes. Buy her a flower or a coffee, whatever it is that makes your wife feel loved and cherished. It's not whether it's big or small or how big it is or how small it is. It's does she feel loved and cherished? And if she does, it's a win, regardless of how big or how small it is. This really is like baseball, okay? Because if you win by 1 or if you win by 20, it still goes in the win column, right? And in fact, if you win by 20 every day for a week, oh, you feel like things are incredible. You've been every Sports Center highlight. They're writing articles about you. But listen, if you go and you stop putting in effort and you lose more than you win for the rest of the season, it's a terrible season. It's a disaster. Probably your manager's getting fired. It's no good. But if day after day, week after week, month after month, you go out and you win more than you lose, whether or not you hit gargantuan home runs, whether or not you got 100 love and cherish points for the party and 500 love and cherish points for the car like you think you did, your season is going to be a big success. You're the feel-good story of the year. You're going to the playoffs. Husbands, love your wives, okay? And love her in the way that she will feel loved. And by the way, if you're a woman right now and you're mad at me because you thought you were getting a car and now you're getting a hug, listen, just talk about it, right? Just go home and talk about it. I'm not trying to mess up your stuff. But fellas, love your wives. When you do, if you do, you will see her blossom into something that is so much more amazing than you ever thought it could be. Here's what I've been doing for quite a few years now. And by the way, this is maybe, again, the most important thing, is here's how I learned this, is my wife told me, right? Not in anger or frustration, but just in communication. She told me, and I listened. Both of those had to happen. But here's what happened, is she explained to me one time, many years ago, that when she comes home, if the kitchen is a mess, she just can't feel settled. If she comes home and there's dishes in the sink and the counter looks chaotic and there's garbage that needs to be taken out, then she just feels like she can't relax and just be at home until that's taken care of. She just feels like things are out of control until the kitchen looks better. However, when she comes home and those aren't the case, the kitchen's just acceptable, however bad her day was, whatever happened, okay, that's done, that's behind me now, I'm home, I can relax, things are good, things are all right. And so, of course, I'm not perfect, no team goes 162-0. But for years now, for probably decades, I've made that a point. Whenever she's coming home from whatever, if you don't know, she's a nurse, she works very, very long hours, not as many days, but long hours. If she's just coming home from work, I make it a point that the kitchen is at least in acceptable shape. If she is on a trip visiting her parents or something and she comes home, I make it a point that she comes home to a kitchen that looks acceptable. And guess what happens? She comes home happier and better adjusted, and it's an easier, better life and relationship for both of us. We all win. Husbands, listen, she doesn't want the new car or the party. All she wants is a clean counter. Love your wives. Unless you want the car, and then just tell him you want the red one, whatever it is, just communicate about that. Now, here's where this flips and the verse becomes really remarkable, in my opinion, in my understanding, is because, as you noted, it tells the wives to love their husbands, but it says something different. It tells the wives not to love their husbands, but to respect her husband. And that's different, and that's interesting. And I remember when Laura and I learned about this, because it was at the same time. And here's what happened, is I'm sure we were probably, because this happened commonly, just in the living room at our house in Kentucky reading books. And she was reading a book on helping you understand the man in your life. It wasn't even for her. We had a pretty good relationship. It was actually for a different person in her life who was going through some things that she was trying to help. But she put her book down, and she asked me this question. She said, Ross, if you had a choice, would you rather feel alone and unloved in the world or feel inadequate and disrespected by everyone? And I didn't think about it for much, but just my sort of immediate gut level reaction, I said, I don't know, those are kind of the same, aren't they? And she said, what? It's said a bunch of women would say that. And she absolutely couldn't understand that. And so I said, okay, well, repeat those again. And I thought about it for a second, like, okay, no, I get it. Okay, those are different. Definitely strong preference for alone and unloved in the world. And then she was even more shocked. Like, how could anybody, isn't that the worst thing in the world, to be unloved and alone in the world? Nobody would choose that. But it turns out that a strong majority of men, not all of them, talk about it. If it's you or it's not you, just talk about it. But about 3 out of 4 men would choose alone and unloved over inadequate and disrespected. And so isn't this interesting that a woman's number one need in her relationship is to feel loved? And for 2,000 years, the Bible has said, husbands, love your wives. Isn't that amazing that as modern psychology has now determined that respect is a man's number one need in the relationship, that for 2,000 years the Bible has said, wives, respect your husbands. I just think that's remarkable and pretty amazing. And listen, again, women, if you're hearing this for the first time, maybe this seems unbelievable to you. I'm telling you, this is real. Obviously not for everybody, but this is true. Here's what just about any man can live with. Is having a perception of, you know what, Ross is not my favorite guy to be around. Probably we're never really going to be friends. I don't really think I would want to be friends on that level, but he does know what he's talking about, and he gets the job done. Now, we'd rather be loved too, right? If we don't have to choose, we'd love to choose both. But we can live with that. Here's what's absolute death to your husband. Is the sort of stereotypical sitcom dad who's a good, lovable guy, but basically a bumbling idiot. The kind of, the wife might say, like, oh, my husband, sometimes I feel like I have to tie his shoes for him in the morning. I'm trying to get him to switch to Velcro, but he's such a good guy. We just love him. You can't help but love him. Everybody loves him. No, that's not okay. That's absolute death to most men. And here's how this very simple misunderstanding can absolutely blow up your relationship. I'm certain this is going to seem very, very familiar to a lot of us here. Is you just imagine that your husband's working on something, fixing something in the house or putting something together, whatever it is, and his wife comes in and he's like something's stuck a little bit, and so he's tugging on it, and his wife says, oh, don't break it. Listen, guys, I've got your back. But please, before we go, let's understand what she is and isn't saying. Because I know how that feels to you. But understand what she's doing. Here's what she's doing, is because a woman's number one need is to be and feel loved, okay? And so that love is demonstrated by the strength of the relationship, right, which is validated by giving and receiving support. And so here's what she's trying to do, is she's saying, hey, I'm here, I'm with you. hey, we're together, we're on the same team. I love you and I support you, and so I'm showing you my love and support. That's what I know it doesn't feel like that, but that's what she's trying to do. And I think this is true. If you were replaced with her girlfriend, she would really appreciate that. Her response would be likely to be something like, oh, yeah, thank you, you're right. We don't want to break it, okay? Because what's most important is being loved, and that love is demonstrated by the strength of a relationship, which is validated by the accepting and receiving support. So now you're on the same team, right? If you even heard, I just put the pronoun we in your girlfriend's mouth when she said that, right? Like, yeah, we don't want to break it. And now you're together, and this is good. This is the relationship is validated, okay? But ladies, you gotta know that your husband will not even be able to register your love if he does not first feel your respect. And so he tends to respond very differently to that comment than your girlfriend does, doesn't he? Probably it's a little bit like this. Stops, sighs, turns and says, do you honestly believe that I did not understand that breaking this would be contrary to my objective? And clearly he's annoyed, and you don't understand why. Why does he not receive my love and support? Here's why. Is because what he heard, what that felt like to him, was not love and support. That felt like, yeah, probably you're an idiot and you're going to blow this whole thing up if I don't come to help you. I know that's not what you meant. That is how that feels and how he understands that. Because remember, he would rather be alone all by himself and unloved than feel inadequate or disrespected. He would rather get this done in 2 hours all by himself and feel at least competent and adequate that he got it done than in 30 minutes with you coming in and making him feel like you didn't really think he was going to be able to get it done in the first place. I know that sounds crazy, and listen, this isn't even like a, better or worse. It's really just sort of a mirror image of just a different value, because you would probably rather get it done in 2 hours with your friend, right, than in 30 minutes by yourself just digging in and getting it done. But listen, if he asks you for help, that's great. That's him saying, I understand what needs to happen, and it's just going to work a lot more easily if I can get a hand with a couple of things here. But when you come in unsolicited, what that feels like to him is you not believing that he can get the job done. This happens, this is a big part sometimes, I think, of why a lot of men end up becoming workaholics and end up coming in on their day off every time and picking up extra shifts, or even just stopping off for a drink on the way home every day, is because he's used to going in every day to his job. And whether or not he necessarily enjoys his job or the people that he works with, he gets stuff done. He's recognized as being competent and adequate, and he's making things happen, and he's respected. And so then he goes home, and he also wants to be a good husband. He wants to be an adequate and respectable husband. And so he looks around for, what can I do? And so he starts folding the towels. And his wife comes in and says, oh, honey, thank you, but listen, no, it's not like that. It's, here, you do it. You know what? It's fine. No, I'll just do it. And after this happens enough times, maybe consciously or maybe not consciously, he starts to think or come to a place where he says, why is it that I can go to work and I make my boss happy and I make my clients happy, but then I come home and after all these years with this woman, I still can't seem to do a thing right or make her happy. And maybe consciously or maybe unconsciously, you sort of come to think about that, you can really salvage a little more self-respect, there's that word again, by just not trying than by continually trying and continually failing. And so then at some point it turns into nobody really knows how or when or why, but I don't know, things just didn't work out for us. Wives, respect your husband. You have no idea how important this is to him. And this has all kind of been the negative side, but when you do this, when you make him feel like you believe in him and like he can do anything and conquer whatever comes into his path, when he believes that you believe that about him, you will unlock something in him where he will move mountains to prove you right. Respect your husbands. Now, finally, if you're here and you're thinking about how, honestly, really this has not been going well for me in my relationship. I have not really been getting what I feel like I need. And here's what tends to happen. I know this is what tends to happen is, what's the best way to encourage or motivate your spouse to start giving you what you need? Well, of course, human nature is to say, again, whether consciously or not consciously, he says, all right, well, if I'm not getting what I need from them, then I'm just going to withhold what they need. And every one of you, that what that leads to is a downward spiral of tragedy and destruction. So here's what you're going to do. If you haven't been doing well on this, here's what you're going to do is you're going to go first. You. And if you've been elbowing your spouse through this whole message, because this is aimed at you, you're taking that back right now. If you're smirking now because your spouse just got called out for elbowing you, you're letting that go, and you're going to go first. You. Okay? To step into what we're talking about, or at the very least, or maybe even the very best, just open the conversation and talk about what it is that they need to feel what they need in your relationship. And I will bet you that wherever you are in your relationship, that the person you're with is man or woman enough that they will recognize that and respond in kind when they see you making that real effort to be who they need you to be. Husbands, love your wives. Okay? And I know you do, and I know sometimes it kills you to be trying to figure out what you can do to make her feel that love. Listen, whether anything or nothing that I said is applicable, just ask her, just talk about it. And I strongly suspect that just the act of you opening that conversation and asking her will be received as an overwhelming act of love. And of course, ladies, you probably know that not all the time, but typically for most men, it's a lot harder to talk about these things, and especially emotional things. And so you got to recognize that and appreciate that and how difficult that is for him and how hard he's going out of his way to try and be the good husband because he loves you. And wives, respect your husband. Sometimes that means letting him struggle with something. I know that feels wrong. But when you come in unsolicited and try and help him and show him your love and support, it just hits differently. But when you believe in him, when you make him understand that you believe in him, you just watch him step into being the man and the husband who God has created him to be. You go first. You. All right, let's pray. Father, wow, thank you for this remarkable, remarkable little verse that for 2,000 years has been pointing to secrets that maybe at least our society and our world has just come to understand in the last couple of decades. Thank you for the remarkable truth and usefulness and practicality that helps us to live as you would have us to live in a relationship with our spouse that not only loves and respects them, but that glorifies you through that relationship and is a wonderful, beautiful, accurate picture of you and how you love the church. And I'm still praying if you're here today, this certainly continues not being necessarily a come to Jesus message per se, but whatever you're going through, wherever you've been, maybe you're here for whatever reason or watching online, and this is the day where you know this is your day to come all the way to Jesus, to make that commitment and step into being the person who he's created you to be. Every one of us, we're sinners. We know it. There's things that are wrong that we've done. That's not a secret. And the cold reality is if God is to be a good and just judge, then sin has to be dealt with justly. But that's why Jesus came, lived the perfect life to absorb justice. That was him taking justice for you when he was put to death on the cross. He had infinite righteousness and only righteousness. So he's able to absorb the justice for your sinfulness and transfer then his righteousness to you so that you are forgiven and become the righteousness of Christ because of what he's done for you, not because of what you've done. Listen, if that's you, right where you sit, you can pray either out loud or say just even silently to God in your heart, and he hears you say, God, I believe that Jesus Christ came and died and was resurrected so that I could be forgiven and be adopted as a child in your family. Please come into my life. Forgive me and adopt me. Begin to make me into the person you created me to be, and give me the life that you have for me. And if that's you, it's not the words or the prayer that saves you, it's that you put your faith in Jesus Christ, and God's grace comes to you through that. You're forgiven and adopted in a new spiritual creature. Please, the best thing you can do is to not try and walk alone from here. Go out to the point when we're done, or send us an email if you're watching online. Let us know the decision that you've made so we can follow up with you and help you down some first simple practical steps toward living the new life that God has for you. Hey, for the rest of us, it's obviously different application points in some level here, wherever you are, or if you're here and maybe you're not, even in a relationship or married or whatever that is. But if you are, the first thing, well, just commit to talking and have a conversation. It's very possible that everything we said here about the generalities do not apply to your specific individual. Okay, open up the conversation and commit to being the spouse that you know your spouse needs, or that they will be able to maybe very shockingly tell you that they need you to be, so that your relationship can wonderfully, beautifully reflect Jesus Christ in the church. Father, thank you so much for everybody here who's come to live a bigger story, to seek you and find you and follow you. Please, through your Spirit, give us the strength and the courage and the follow through in some of these intensely practical matters to step into the life that you have for us and make the Sunday morning decisions into real Monday through Saturday and for the rest of our lives, life change for our relationships and for your glory, Father. In Jesus' name, amen.